And to now understand where the Russia-Ukraine crisis is headed next, we are joined by Dr. Rajan Kumar, School of International Studies, joining us from Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. Now, welcome, sir, to the program. President Putin has been demanding that Ukraine cede more territory before he agrees to a ceasefire. What exactly are Putin's territorial demands? Why is he insistent on them? And do they have any historical justification?
Thank you, Tanvi, for having me here. Let me clarify to your audience that the narrative that Russia wants more territory, that's slightly lopsided, because what Russia is looking for, there are three things. First, that Ukraine should recognize the territory that Russia has captured, and in a state, what Russia is also trying to negotiate. Russia is saying that we'll take the entire Donetsk region, and Russia would be willing to give Zaporizhia and Kherson back to Ukraine. Unfortunately, Ukrainian side is not willing to accept the territory that Russia has captured, especially the Donetsk that Russia is insisting. President Putin is solely focusing on just one aspect of the conflict, that is ceasefire. And Russia is not willing to agree for the ceasefire because of a number of reasons. First, because he does not, President Putin does not completely trust Trump, because Trump has been changing on every issue, right from Iran to Gaza to tariff, etc. So there is a lack of trust. Second, Russia believes that if Russia agrees for ceasefire without any kind of, what it calls the root causes or the peace deal, then that might be used, the timeline might be used by Ukraine to rearm itself, because Ukraine at the moment is losing territory, very slow, but again, is in a very weak and vulnerable situation. And that's exactly the reason why Ukraine is looking for ceasefire. European countries are also looking for ceasefire. And Trump wants ceasefire so that he can show to the world and to his domestic constituency that he's the peacemaker, and he's also a claimant of so-called Nobel Prize. But unfortunately, Russia is not trusting the Western strategy. And Russia says that we'll agree for some kind of ceasefire only when there is a convergence of interest on the larger issue. What are the larger issues? One is what will happen to the territory that Russia has. Second, what will happen to the status of Ukraine vis-a-vis NATO? The West has to agree that Ukraine will not be given the membership of NATO. Third, Russia also insists that there should be no NATO forces or even European forces. NATO, in the sense that US is not willing to send the army, but some of the European countries are saying that they would be willing to send some army as a coalition of willing, etc., where most of the European countries, Britain, France, Germany, etc., they have agreed. So the core issues have not been resolved, and that's exactly the reason why Russia doesn't want to go just for the ceasefire.
Okay. Now, Russia has also been demanding Ukraine's neutrality in return for a ceasefire. What does the proposed neutrality mean in practical terms, and would Ukraine and Europe agree to it?
Yes, that's a very interesting question. Neutrality means that Ukraine will not be the member of NATO. And that has been the main reason for this conflict. Right from, if you see from Russian perspective, that has been the main cause. And the Western perspective is that Ukraine is an independent country, sovereign country. It can decide whatever membership it wants to. But Russia, because Russia says that NATO is a security organization. NATO and Soviet Union has a history of clash and history of tension in the Cold War period. So Ukraine, being a very close country ethnically, politically, and also socially, etc. So Ukraine should not become a member of NATO. And so neutrality essentially means that Ukraine should not become a member of NATO. And ideally, from Russian perspective, Ukraine should also not become the membership of European Union. But after the development, after the war, Russia is willing to agree to NATO, European Union's membership of this Ukraine, but Russia will never agree to Ukraine's membership to NATO. So neutrality means no membership and also no army of NATO in Ukraine, or not even European army without US, what you call it.
Would you say that the inability so far of the US to supply Ukraine with Tomahawks may have hardened President Putin's stand on terms of a ceasefire?
I think that's the Western narrative. If you read most of the newspapers of West, Washington Post, New York Times, Guardian, etc., they are under the misconception that Putin agreed to the deal because of the Tomahawk missile. Tomahawk is a cruise missile. It's not easy to detect, and it can carry very destructive weapons, including nuclear weapons, and cannot be detected easily by S-400, which Russia has as a missile defense system. But unfortunately, that is not the case. Let me tell you, even if Ukraine is given even Tomahawk missile, the war, the kind of war which is happening, the advantage that Russia has will not change. It will lead to more destruction, let me tell you. If Tomahawk missile is used by Ukraine to target some of the refineries, etc. of Russia, Russia will retaliate with other weapons which are very, very destructive. And Russia might target civilian areas also in Kiev and other places of Ukraine, and maybe it might escalate to Europe also. So the Western narrative is that with Tomahawk, Russia will come under pressure. But so far, I know Russia, and I've been teaching on this subject for the last 20 years, I can tell you, Tomahawk will not make any difference except escalating the tension in the region.
So finally, at this point, do you see any early end to the fighting in Ukraine, or is the conflict likely to drag on?
For some time, conflict is likely to continue. In that area is winter, the entire area is frozen. So conflict can go with a very slower pace when it comes to capturing the territory, etc. But unless and until some kind of agreement happens, starting with the ceasefire, but also as Russia says that there has to be some long-term peace deal in which the core issue, the root causes have to be resolved. So unless until that is resolved, Russia has advantage and Russia is not going to stop the war.
Okay. We'll leave it here. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajan Kumar, for joining us on DD India News Hour.